Right, hello again, and God bless. We're going to continue. This is the day after we covered Matthew 24 from 4 to 14. And what we will discuss today will even shed more light and emphasize that Jesus was talking about the destruction of the temple. In these verses, it will clear up some more. And the next verses, when we get to 29 and 30, which is apocalyptic language, I think it would shed all the light that's needed for you to understand that this has nothing to do with end times, but the end of the Jewish age by the destruction of the temple. So let's go to Matthew 24:15. So when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by the prophet Daniel, standing in the holy place, in parentheses, let the reader understand. And let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let's stop there. So you have two expressions in this chapter. One is commonly known as abomination of desolation, spoken by Daniel. We all know it's Daniel 9. The 70th week, the 70-week discourse. And then the other one was Great Tribulation. And now you will read that in Matthew 24, verse 21. And the Great Tribulation, as you will see, has to be related to 70 AD. Because remember the verse, it's a key verse. This generation will witness this. Okay? In verse 23, let me just jump ahead. It's morning, so the sun is kind of disturbing my view here. Then if anyone says to you, look, here is the Christ, or there he is, don't believe it. Now, we just read in Matthew 24:16 when he said about Judea. We have, in the end times, why would Judea be concerned is something you have to figure out for yourself. Okay, so abomination of desolation, that's mentioned in 15. When you, he says, let's read it together. So when you, who is you? It's what's called the inner circle, those four disciples, Peter and his brother Andrew, James and John, two brothers of Zebedee. So he's telling them, when you see these things, remember, because they asked for the sign. Tell us what will be the sign of this, what's going on, is going to happen. So he's telling them, he's covering the second part of the question. And I have to take you to Luke 21:20, which is the parallel verse to that. So let's go there and read it. Luke 21:20. The King James, it says, and when you shall see Jerusalem compassed or surrounded with armies, then know that the desolation thereof is nigh or near. Okay? And this is a problem where the dispensationalist lie is so cleverly articulated by the formation and the creation of this Israel right now. It's really, if you think about it, about the lie, how deep it is, how distracting it is, it's mind-boggling. Only the devil can think of such deceiving thoughts and actions. Anyway, that's for another discussion about the creation of Israel 68 years ago. So Luke explained it. He says it's easy to explain with Luke because he says when you see the armies, which is the Roman army surrounding Jerusalem, know that it's near. Now this is a warning for the Christians to escape the wrath of the Roman army in 70 AD. And they all escaped. We're going to see that in the following verses. Why do we miss this point? Why do we miss this point? The people that believe in futurism, why do they miss this point? It's clear. unless some teachers are teaching you otherwise. Jesus said, when you see this, he's talking to those 4 disciples. Okay? So, when will this be? The answer, this generation. What are the signs? The answer is the abomination of desolation. That's what Matthew said. Luke says, when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, which is mentioned in Daniel 9. So, remember, Jesus said in Matthew 23:38, the previous chapter, your house is left to you desolate. This is all related. Okay, so let's go from 16. We're going to cover from 16 or 15, that is, to 22. So he's telling them to flee to the mountains. How could this be the end times? Flee to the mountains? I mean, this had to happen back then. As a matter of fact, the Christian writer Eusebius, who wrote, you should read this book, it's called Ecclesiastes History, or the Church History. It was written in 325 AD. He tells us that Christians escaped before 70 AD. As a matter of fact, in verse 19 it says, and alas for woman, and woe to the woman who are pregnant, and for those who are nursing infants in those days. What does that have to do in the end times? You know, this was difficult times back in those days, okay? Remember in Luke 23, turn to there and read it on your own. I'm not going to read all of it because it's time consuming. Luke 23, from 27 to 30, Jesus is warning those women, okay, and their children. Remember when he was going to be crucified, he says, why do you weep for me? Weep for yourselves and for your children. He's talking about what's coming in 70 AD. Okay, so and then we have, pray that your flight may not be in the winter or on Sabbath. What does that have to do with end times? In the winter, back in those days, it's very hard to travel. The terrain were very difficult. Not like these days, you take the car and you flee. Okay? And then Sabbath. Who keeps Sabbaths? We know that some Christian sect keep the Sabbath, but most Christians don't keep the Sabbath. Okay? Then we have Matthew 24:21. For then there will be great tribulation, such as has not been from the beginning of the world until now, no, and never will be. Again, we see Jesus as a Jewish prophet talking in hyperbole language. Hyperbole means exaggeration. We all use it, okay? Josephus explained here how horrific the situation was. It's a figure of speech. We say that. You have a nice meal and you say, oh, I've never tasted something like that before. And you see yourself saying the same thing the next week when you have another great meal. Just one example. Yeah. And then in Exodus, we have an example of the locust. Okay? Moses talking about exaggerating. And then in Joel, we have him saying the same thing about the locust that has never been before. It's just a figure of speech. It's a language that part of the world spoke with. Let's go to 22. And if those days had not been cut short, okay, I'm not sure if I skipped. No, I didn't skip. No human being would be saved. I'm reading from the ESV. It's a little easier. But for the sake of the elect, those days will be cut short. Okay. Well, let's go to Luke. Well, go back to Luke 21, 20 to 22, and read it for yourself. Luke says, in this land, you see, Luke makes it easier for a Gentile to understand. Now, let's go to the shortened days. How are the days going to be shortened? And you have to refer to or read from other parts, you know, not the Bible. For instance, when Eusebius wrote that history about Vespasian, who was the emperor at the time, Vespasian had his strongest army surrounding Jerusalem. Now, when Nero committed suicide before 70 AD, Vespasian got the news and he had to go back to Rome to rule, to become the emperor. And he took his army with him, the army that surrounded Jerusalem. And between that time and the time that he sent his son Titus, we all know that Titus is the one who destroyed Jerusalem and the temple, there was enough time for the Christians to flee. Okay? And that's what's recorded in the history outside of the Bible. So Eusebius, like I said, he said that in that book I told you, Ecclesiastes history, the church history in 325, that all Christians were warned by God to leave. It's actually by Jesus Christ, okay, for the elect's sake. So all Christians escaped to the Jordan area. It's a mountainous area, and who, if you want to escape, it's not easy for you to escape when you have surrounding armies. But they had to leave. All flesh, meaning Israel, by the way. Another wording that you have to learn how to read. So you just have to read Luke 21 from 20 to 23, and it equates with Matthew 24:21. Okay, the great distress. That's how Luke spoke of it. Great distress in the land. Okay, in the land of Israel, in the land of the people of the land. Okay, great tribulation, meaning great distress in the land. Okay, so remember, Luke explains this a little better for us because he was writing to Theophilus. Theophilus was a Roman man, and he couldn't understand what Matthew is talking about regarding abomination of desolation, you see. But this is how you have to learn about the Hebrew idioms. And this is where Matthew is confused by so many, okay? They never referred to Luke or Luke 21 or Mark 13, and that's where I advise from the beginning, turn the pages on them, and you have a clarification so you won't be confused. Let me see if I covered everything here. For instance, Matthew 21, 24, 21, and 22. Then at that time, you will hear of false Christ, you see. And not at the end of the world, it's during the siege. And Josephus said that himself. I'm not sure if I want to continue. I may just end it here because I want to cover small sections, and every time we get to the next section, it will shed some more light on this whole discourse, that it has nothing to do with end time. I'm going to end it short, and I just may cover 23 to 28 in the next session. Okay? I hope you're enjoying this. I know that this topic of 70 AD, the destruction of Jerusalem, is not that edifying. I personally find the Word of God edifying. Every word in the Bible is edifying to me because the knowledge of the Word of God is very important to me. Okay? So I hope you stay with me. And like I said, give me some feedback. I noticed that 40 people have viewed what I discussed yesterday. I don't know who they are, but I'd like some feedback. If you don't have a YouTube channel, I understand. Okay, God bless, and I'll see you soon.